Hi, I'm Kurt Gartner, and we are here today to talk about making better VR trailers. So before we dive into the nitty-gritty of this, I just want to give you guys a really quick background on who I am and why I'm up in front of you talking today. So I am from a small town in Canada in the middle of nowhere called Winnipeg, and in a past life, I sort of worked in the visual effects industry for about 8 years, and I worked on about 25 or so sort of like B to C grade Hollywood movies, nothing super really good except maybe Across the Universe, and Chum Scrubber was really good, but like 5 people saw it. So basically after working in the VFX industry, there's a lot of crunch and there's a lot of grind, and I wanted to sort of find an out, and I was very fortunate to meet a bunch of independent video game developers. And to make a long story very, very short, basically I started making trailers for them, and one thing led to another, and now I make indie game trailers full time, which is kind of incredible and amazing. So that kind of led me to these 2 trailers here, the Job Simulator and Fantastic Contraption trailer. Now, I was very lucky to be the person that created 2 of the 3 launch trailers for the Vive. The only other one was Tilt Brush. So I want to talk about the Fantastic Contraption trailer just for a quick second here. And it was a ton of work, and it was one of the first sort of like high quality mixed reality VR trailers. And if you haven't seen the trailer, this is it. And basically the way that we did this is we shot the player in front of a green screen and we composited the player into a virtual environment. And I had a ton of fun making this trailer, and it's a fantastic way to showcase what it's like to be inside of VR. And I even gave a bunch of talks about it, about how it's probably the best way to showcase what it's like to be in VR. And I still think that's kind of true in some cases, but it's definitely not suitable for every single game. And if we go behind the scenes and take a look at what it takes to make a mixed reality trailer, there's actually a lot of drawbacks. They're extremely complex to set up. You need a lot of post-production knowledge to do them well. They're extremely expensive, and they take a lot of time to plan and execute on both the developer and on the post-production side. And one of the big things is if they're done poorly, they can actually make your game kind of look like crap. So there's really one main reason that I've only done one big mixed reality trailer like this, and that's because pretty much everybody that gets in touch with me either grossly underestimates the cost and the time that it actually takes to put these together at the level that we did. So for a lot of smaller developers, something like this is kind of out of the reach, just either creatively, technically, or even financially. So what most developers choose to do is they make their trailer from first-person footage, and this is kind of the result. Now, pretty much everybody uses first-person footage to present their VR game right now, and people have argued to me even that because VR is like this inherently first-person experience, that's how we should show the footage, because that's what the player is seeing. But the problem is the 2D footage that you're recording from the head mount display looks completely different than what the player is actually experiencing. And if you take away anything from this entire presentation, it's that your head is not a camera. And in fact, your head is literally the worst possible camera in existence. And in the real world, your brain and your eyes kind of cancel out all this jitter from your brain, or from your head. And it's like it acts as this built-in image stabilizer. And the problem with the 2D footage from a head mount display is there is no stabilization by default. So it looks bloody awful. There's this shaky mess, it's unfocused, it's jittery, and when you tilt your head to the side like this, it looks awful. And worst case, these kind of trailers and videos can actually make your viewers sick. Like, I personally get motion sickness watching head mount display footage at 60 frames per second. So aside from all these problems that I just mentioned, this is another main thing. It's incredibly difficult to make a very compelling trailer when every single shot is from the exact same perspective. So if we look at the film world, and this video here is from a movie called Hardcore Henry, and there's many reasons there aren't a lot of first-person movies out there aside from like obscure art films kind of like this. They also suffer from all the same problems. The footage is shaky, it's unfocused, it's jittery, and honestly, most of them are boring as hell because everything is just from the same point of view. And the other thing is it's a lot harder to show emotion, and it's a lot harder to connect with a character or a player that you just cannot see. So when it comes to trailers, you really only get one chance to make an impact with your trailer. Should come up here in a sec. There we go. And trailers are often the purchasing decision point for players. So it really makes sense to take them seriously. You really need to focus on the best and most interesting bits of your game and just showcase those. And just like film, things like sound, music, shot framing length, camera movement, all these things are used to clearly communicate information to the viewer. And trailers are really unique in that they're extremely short, so each shot really needs to convey, or clearly convey, information to the viewer in an entertaining and engaging way in a very, very short amount of time. A good trailer has things like a dynamic structure, there's a rhythm to it, there's different angles, there's a variety of shots. And if you're completely relying on first-person footage, it really handcuffs that. It handcuffs your ability to make an interesting trailer because you can't use any of the cinematic language that we sort of developed over the last century. And finally here is what your game looks like from a first-person perspective doesn't represent what it feels like to play. And I think a lot of people forget this when you're making a trailer. You're trying to convey the tone and the feel of your game. You're not showing what your game looks like, you're trying to convey what it feels like. And so everyone that's hopefully been in VR has tried a multiplayer VR game where there's an avatar in there, and everyone's like, wow, it's so amazing how much emotion is conveyed from just like the hands and the heads. I can sense all these mannerisms. And so why don't we use that to our advantage? So what we're going to look at here are these 4 trailers here, and we're going to dissect them a bit and see why filming an avatar from a third-person perspective is much better than using first-person footage. And the first trailer we're going to look at here is the new trailer for Fantastic Contraption. Alrighty, so that is Fantastic Contraption. Now, what we're going to look at here for the next couple slides are just a few examples why I feel the first-person footage using avatars is just a huge improvement over using first-person footage. Sorry, I think I said first-person footage. The handheld footage, rather, is a huge improvement. So when we actually captured the footage for this game to make this trailer, what we did is we actually captured a handheld view on the left, and we captured a smooth head-mount display view on the right. So we could actually see what the difference is between the exact same shot from 2 different cameras. So if we look at the handheld camera on the left, firstly, this shot really feels dynamic. It feels interesting to watch. The camera kind of starts out wide and then pans in with this precise timing on when the player is grabbing a wheel from Neko to kind of illustrate, oh, she acts as the toolbox in the game. And then we pan past her and focus on the contraption that the player is building. And the camera movement leads your eye to the most important things in the shot. And if we compare this with the first-person footage on the right, this shot really just feels flat, it feels boring, and above all, it's kind of vomit-inducing because of the head tilt that the player is doing there. And Neko gets lost in the grass. She's the main point of the shot, but it's not really clear what the player is grabbing from. And everything is kind of happening in the bottom, like, third of the frame. It's just not a compositionally nice-looking shot. So one of the things that we really wanted to convey with this trailer was this new sort of seated scale that's part of the Oculus Touch version of Fantastic Contraption. And when you're showing the game through first person, scale can be very, very deceiving. It's hard to get a sense for how large or small some of these contraptions are because there's no player in there. The size isn't always obvious. So filming an avatar was a simple way to get around this problem and give the viewer a really good sense of scale of how things work contextually in the world. So if we look at the handheld camera on the left here, this shot clearly puts the size of the contraption in context next to the player. You can see how small it is, and the camera angle kind of focuses your attention at the top of the shot where the contraption is traveling. And the emotion of the player is really clearly conveyed too when the contraption hits the goal. You can see he's anticipating it. When it hits the top, he gets excited, and then boom, it's awesome, right? And we've sensed that excitement. So on the first person footage on the right, until the controller kind of comes into view at the end there, it's really impossible to know how large that contraption is in this shot. It could be very large and far away from us. It could be small and close. We really don't know. There's nothing in the middle to give us any sense of scale. And secondly, it's really impossible to read any sense of anticipation or emotion from the player because you can't see them and you can't see that sense of anticipation like you can on the left. So this shot here, this is actually one of my favorite shots in the trailer. The handheld camera on the left is this really dynamic and interesting shot. The camera kind of follows the pink ball as it hits the goal ball on the ground and narrowly avoids the yellow cylinder getting in the way. And the camera continues to pull out to show the player celebrating, and it gives us a sense of scale of the entire level. So we're doing like 3 different things at once here in this one shot. And if we look at the first person footage on the right, you don't nearly get the same sense of excitement and anticipation as you do from the handheld footage. And when the player reacts in excitement, we're just looking up at the clouds for no real reason. We don't really know why. It's just really, really hard to read any sort of sense of emotion from that first person footage. So speaking of emotion, there's not really many games out there that get my heart pumping like Space Pirate Trainer. So this is the one we're going to look at next. I love that game. It's so good. So I want to just talk about mixed reality again for a second here, because Space Pirate Trainer kind of seems like the perfect use case for like this badass mixed reality trailer. And honestly, like Space Pirate Trainer is like my favorite VR game of all time so far anyway. And this footage kind of makes the game look like crap. When you're playing Space Pirate Trainer, you feel like this badass, and these guys look like anything but, to be honest. And there's this dude that's dressed in the costume, but it just doesn't really mesh with the in-game world at all. The footage isn't kinetic, the camera work is bad, and when you're doing mixed reality, when you're doing mixed reality, the camera placement is really limited. You can only be inside that tracking volume without doing some crazy complex math. And the compositing is also really, really bad in this. So it just feels low budget and underwhelming. And so just because you can do mixed reality doesn't really mean that you should. So for Space Pirate Trainer, this is the same sort of thing. We've got a handheld shot on the left and a first-person footage on the right. So in Space Pirate Trainer, there's this kind of problem because all the things in the game are generally very, very far away from the player. And so what we ended up doing is with the handheld camera, we put a longer focal length lens on it to make things that are further away from the player kind of seem larger and bigger on screen than they would be with a wide angle lens. So the handheld shot on the left, this footage is definitely like, it's more kinetic, it's more cinematic, it's a dynamic. The action is kind of framed in this cinematic way, and the camera follows the player's reaction to the incoming heavy droid, and the camera can kind of anticipate the movement of that and frame it to create a compelling shot. So if we compare that with the first person footage on the right, this is the exact same shot, it's really hard to tell what's actually going on because the gun and the shield obscure the main aspect of the shot, which is that heavy droid coming into view. And it's also way too small to be seen clearly. The gun covers it up at the end. You don't see the big explosion. It's not cinematic, it's not kinetic, it doesn't feel interesting or exciting to watch. So this other example here, this is a perfect Space Pirate Trainer shot. It shows the player moving to the right, avoiding those bullets and sort of dodging by traveling to the right there. It clearly conveys what's happening in the game. But the footage on the right, you can't really tell exactly what's going on. You can't see what the player is physically doing. He's dodging the bullets by walking right in the play space, but all it looks like is the droids are kind of just shooting to the left, because there's no sense of parallax. There's nothing in the middle there to give us any sense of real movement. So it just feels a little bit weird and confusing to watch. So when it comes to like trailers in general, whether it's VR or not, basically one of the rules of thumb is just showcase as wide a variety of shots and interesting environments as possible. And that's really tough for a game like Space Pirate Trainer when it's basically all taking place in one location, in one environment, and the player doesn't really move all that much. So in order to get some different angles and different kind of camera work, my friend Vince actually came up with this idea when we were shooting. He's like, why don't we put a camera on the droid? And I was like, boom. So I told Dirk about it, and he coded it in an evening, and it was in the next build, and it was awesome. We basically hit a hotkey on the keyboard to swap the camera between different droids, and it allowed us to get these really, really interesting sweeping camera moves that we wouldn't have been able to get any other way. And basically allowed us to get this really neat thing for free, essentially. And we just kept hitting the button, and my friend was just playing, and we got all these really, really cool looking shots out of it. So you might be asking yourself, how are we actually shooting these trailers? And literally, we're doing them in my basement. There's very low overhead in order to make something that looks this good. We have a third Vive controller, which is on top of my makeshift Steadicam that cost me $5. It's just a bunch of weights. There's not much to it. And basically, I pay my friend Vince to come and play the game, and we kind of work together, and we make these trailers. I have a DSLR. This is my ghetto setup. I have my DSLR pointed at my computer monitor, mirroring the image to a TV, so that's kind of like my remote monitor, and then I'm just kind of watching the TV and filming as he's playing the game. And it's really great. It's the funnest way to shoot trailers I've ever did. It's so much fun. Like, trust me, you should try it. It's so much fun. And I love it because it allows for a lot of creativity, and you can change things on the fly. And when you compare it with like a mixed reality trailer, you have like 12 people on set, and you don't really have much room for experimentation. So here, we were trying to get this over-the-shoulder, like first-person shooter kind of shot where we're shooting these droids, and we were struggling to get it. And this is our solution. So my friend Vince was like, just give me the Steadicam, and I'll hold it behind me so it's locked to my shoulder. And it allowed us to get this really great shot of the weapon swap and see the UI on the controller. And we were struggling for like half an hour I was trying to frame it like this and shoot them. It was impossible. So just the relaxed nature of being able to, play around with things allowed us to get some really, really neat shots like this. So the next one we're going to look at here is the trailer for Rick and Morty Virtual Reality.
Hey you! Are you tired of the same old boring reality day in and day out? Well, now you can strap this box to your face and experience the lives of your favorite Rick and Morty characters! It's Rick and Morty VR! It's got throwing things!
Whoa, what is this, Rick? It looks like some sort of crazy video game about us or something.
It's not just a video game, Morty. It's a virtual reality game. I sold our likenesses to some video game publisher for a lot of money, Morty. And they made a whole virtual reality game, and it's got all kinds of great things about it, Morty.
I don't understand, Rick. I mean, like I don't know if I like this,
I don't care if you like it, Morty, because it's a VR game. It's the hottest new trend, Morty. It's the hottest new future of entertainment, Morty.
Yeah, I don't know, Rick.
Come on, look at these features, Morty. It doesn't get much better than this, Morty.
Well, at least this part looks kind of fun, I guess. Look at those guys explode. Like, what else do you actually do in this game?
You might be asking yourself, what else does this game have to offer? Well, it's got one of these things in it. You can do this.
It's like a gimmick, Rick. I mean, who's gonna play this?
You're gonna play this, Morty.
What? Oh my God! You killed it. I mean, me.
You'll never understand its majesty. VR for everyone. Everyone with the box on their face, Morty. One day you'll understand, Morty. It's raining money here at VR Land. It's raining money. Ha wubba lubba dub dub.
Indeed. Everyone with a box on their face, Morty, was my line. I'm really glad that made it in. So I want to just return back to mixed reality for a second. So why didn't we use mixed reality for this trailer? And if anybody's been following the story of Alchemy, you know that they were working on this really, really awesome mixed reality tech before they got bought by Google. Now who knows what's happening with it. But basically what we initially discussed using this, and we were like, hey, we're going to do this badass mixed reality trailer. But then we were like, this has to be a multi-platform launch. We're going to be launching on Oculus and the Vive. So in order to do a mixed reality trailer with 2 platforms, we would have had to shoot the entire trailer twice, once with the Oculus HMD and once with the Vive. And if anyone's tried to do mixed reality with the Oculus, you know, it's a little bit touchy still. So with the time that we've had to put this trailer together, it would have just been way too costly and complex. So shooting an avatar basically allowed us to make a platform agnostic trailer that could be used for everything. And I will get back to that little asterisk in a second. So using mixed reality also didn't really make sense in this case, because in game you're playing as clone Morty. You're not really playing as a human player. So the best thing that we could do is literally make the player another Morty just like they appear in game with a platform agnostic HMD, and that just solved a whole bunch of problems for us. So we also ran into this kind of problem with the Contraption trailer. So if anyone's played Fantastic Contraption, you know that their controller model is specifically modeled differently depending on the platform you're playing on. So the Oculus controller looks different, the PSVR controller looks different, and the Vive controller looks different. So when we were shooting the update trailer for the Oculus and the PSVR, we were like, oh, how do we solve this? We don't want to shoot the whole trailer twice. So since we were splitting the screen up into quads already, the artist, Lindsay Jorgensen, came up with this amazing idea. It's like, why don't we just render the Oculus controllers on the left and the PSVR controllers on the right and capture it at the same time? And it was brilliant. Like, we basically, 80% of the PSVR trailer was the direct footage swap, just left for right. And we had 2 trailers, we shot 2 trailers at the exact same time. So the thing that's ironic about this is we actually shot both of these trailers with the Vive. And it's not, it's not possible to make a trailer like this with either the Oculus or the PSVR because you have such limited tracking volumes. So we had to use the Vive to shoot it. So I just thought that was kind of fun. So getting back to the use for everything, coming back to Rick and Morty for a second here, a long time after the game came out, Adult Swim got in touch with me and they're like, hey, this game's coming out for PSVR. Do you want to make a new trailer for it? And I was like, ugh, you know, I didn't really want to make another Rick and Morty trailer. So in the end, after a bit of back and forth, basically I sent them the entire just like full res render of my final trailer. And this is what they did. They outsourced a 3D team to camera and object track every single shot in the trailer and rotoscope in a new platform-specific PSVR HMD. And when they sent me the test shot of this, I was like, you've got to be kidding me. This is so much work. But here's the trailer. It turned out amazing. Like, the guys they got to do this did an incredible job. But this, I cannot I can't overstress like how much work this is. This is an obscene amount of post and VFX and rotoscoping work. It cost a ton of money probably. And so I kind of asked them, like, why did you guys do this? Why didn't you just make an easier trailer or a different trailer? And they loved this trailer so much that it was actually worth it for them to go to all the time and effort to go and do this and put in a new HMD. So, you know, generally speaking, I say just make a platform agnostic HMD. It'll just save yourself a bunch of trouble. But if you have a really special case, and I think the reason is because Rick and Morty is such a big IP, and Sony really, really wanted like their own HMD on there because of brand synergy and, you know, all that good stuff. So I think that's probably what was happening. But, you know, platform agnostic, generally speaking, is the way to go. So the last trailer we're going to take a look at today here is the trailer for Super Hypercube. So that's Super Hypercube. So Super Hypercube is a very, very difficult game to explain in a first-person trailer, and it has a lot of the same problems that a game like Space Pirate Trainer has. And everything that's happening in the game is happening very far away from the player. And for Super Hypercube specifically, the cube that you're manipulating happens to be right in front of the player. And so it obscures the hole that you actually need to fit the cube through. So everything that you need to see is kind of happening behind this giant cube. So this is the PSVR launch trailer, and they really did the best that they could with this, but because the PSVR tracking volume is so limited, you can't really move your head to very far to get both things in the same shot. So I knew when they were doing the Vive launch, this is one of the things we wanted to fix. We wanted to get the camera off of the player's head and move it far to the side. And this would allow us to create some shots that show the player rotating the cube and slotting it through the hole at the same time, and really sort of let that sink into the viewer's mind. So the other thing we wanted to do is shoot from the reverse angle. So we wanted to see the player popping up behind the cube. And since all the text would be inverted in the UI, we need to have toggles to turn off the UI and things like that. So I think it turned out really, really nice. So one of the other little custom things that we added was this thing called Orbit Cam. And this basically allowed us to lock the target of the camera to the cube, and we could rotate around it at different speeds. And so since there's not really a lot of different gameplay in Super Hypercube, this just allowed us to get a bunch of different shots from a bunch of different angles, just to create some different visual variety in the trailer. So after looking at all this sort of custom stuff we had to do for each game, you might be asking yourself, it's like, man, this is like a lot of developer time just for a bloody trailer. And yet, to be honest, yeah, it is. All of these trailers required a really non-trivial amount of work on the developer's part. And this is one of the first tests that sort of came out of Super Hypercube. And it's obvious that a ton of things were broken. There's Z clipping all over the place. The bloom and glow is missing. And this kind of shows the little UI that they had to build for me. And this allowed me to do things like change the FOV of the lens, change the smoothing, give myself like infinite lives and infinite bombs so I could get to the later levels without dying all the time. So there's just a lot of different things that had to get integrated in here. And this game had the most problems integrating a third person camera, because it used a lot of screen space effects, and so that got all the code just got broken when there was two cameras that sort of needed those effects applied at the same time. So this is an extreme example, but it took about 6 months of on and off work on the developer's part to get this all working, because she was only working on it part-time after the game launched. So yeah, just make sure to plan for it. So to wrap everything up here, why should you film an in-game avatar for your VR trailer? Well, firstly, first-person footage, I feel, is just a very poor way to represent your game. At best, it's shaky, it's unfocused, it's uncinematic. It really doesn't represent the feeling of being in VR. And in worst cases, it can literally make your viewer sick, like me, if you have motion sickness. And secondly, what your game looks like from a first-person perspective doesn't represent what it feels like to play. So when you're making a trailer, you're trying to convey the tone of your game. You're not just showing, this is what my game looks like, you want to convey what my game feels like. And also, variety is key to a great trailer. Trailers are incredibly short, so every single shot really needs to make an impact and clearly communicate as much information as possible. And it's very difficult to make a compelling trailer when every single shot is from the same perspective. So when we compare avatar-based trailers to mixed reality trailers, avatar-based trailers are just way more cost-effective than mixed reality. Trying to create a professional-looking mixed reality trailer requires a lot of time and money and resources, and there's just a lot less overhead involved, which opens up more possibilities for getting interesting footage. You have more time to experiment when you're on set and there's 12 people waiting around. Time is money, and it's really the time to execute and not the time to experiment. So when there's fewer people involved, you have more time to experiment, and you can take your time. You can look at footage and change directions if need be. And something that is sort of a new issue is actor performance fatigue. When you're performing a VR game, it's actually exhausting. For Space Pirate Trainers, we had to do 20 or 30-minute bursts because it's like a workout playing that game. So we will play for a bit, take half an hour, review the footage, see if anything looked good, figured out what we could change, and then we will go back at it. So this kind of process makes things a lot more enjoyable. On set, if you were to take a 20-minute break, you'd be burning money like crazy. So 2 last points here. If you want a great trailer, just make sure you plan for it from the beginning. You only get one chance to make an impact with your trailer. And these days, video is obviously of the utmost importance. Nobody really reads blogs and things about games anymore. People are watching videos, they're watching streams on YouTube, they're watching GIFs on Twitter, on Reddit and whatnot. So you constantly need to be showcasing the best parts of your game in these bite-sized little nuggets. So showing a beautiful, easy to understand version of your game is sort of like the bare minimum to getting any attention these days. And I'm not the first person to say this and won't be the last, but game development is marketing. A lot of developers will leave their trailer until the last minute. And this is just like 100% the wrong way to approach things. Marketing starts the day you start development. And I've had so many people get in touch with me and be like, hey, we love that Space Pirate Trainer trailer. We want to do something like that. And then I'll say, okay, well, we need to, have all these camera controls. We need to make an avatar. And they're like, well, we don't have the developer resources to do that because they're too busy finishing the game. And at that point, I'm just like, like, what do you do? So I'll just have to walk away sometimes. So it's just, you need to remember to schedule the creation of these tools into the game as you're building it. And hopefully at the end of the day, you can come up with a really interesting and engaging VR trailer. Thanks. Yeah, I think you need to go up to the mic if you have some questions.
Great, thank you. How did you get the camera attached to that Vive, like over the shoulder? How did you do that?
So are you talking like how did I, like for the over-the-shoulder shot? Like
Yeah.
literally just holding the Vive controller, like the Vive controller is acting as the virtual camera.
But he also had 2 in his hand.
Yeah, so I have 3 controllers that are paired to the Vive. So the 2 that the player is using and a third one which is wirelessly connected to a dongle that's inside the HMD actually. And so there's 3 controllers that are paired at the same time.
And so then that one's just, it's like floating around.
Yep, basically, yeah. And so in game, the developer just basically says this third camera, once the other 2 are paired, the third one will always be the camera. And then that just always locks it to that.
Cool.
Yeah.
What can I do to have you take a look at my trailer?
Shoot me an email, grab a card and send me an email. That's the best way to get in touch.
Awesome.
I'm up there too, I think, yeah. Or on Twitter works as well. Yeah.
Hi there.
Hi.
Yeah, great talk. Oliver Kelly from Rocket Worldwide. I had a question about Pirate Trainer.
Yeah.
Naturally, you had to build the avatar for the video. Can you explain some of the development process? Did you have tools or techniques to
Yeah,
make that
I didn't
happen?
actually, I'm not the developer, so Dirk actually did all of the avatar work, and he took about 2 weeks or so to get it all working. I think that they were already developing the avatar, so it's like all the modeling and texturing had already been done because they knew they needed it.
Right.
And so then he just got all the IK systems working, so basically, how the feet and the legs are all sort of triggered by the position of where the head is in this. And he has some experience in dealing with that stuff from stuff he's done in the past, so it went really, really smoothly. But that being said, if you look at the trailer, you notice most of the shots are from the waist up because where all the jankiness happens is in the waist down. The legs and the feet are kind of janky. There's some shots, if you look in frame by frame, the legs and knees are kind of popping a little. So it's not perfect, but you shoot around it, right? So we just shot from the waist up and it looks great.
Yeah.
Nobody knows anywhere, right?
Right, I assume this is because you don't have feet tracking, right? But if you did have feet tracking, then you might be able to...
Even with feet tracking, it still can be a bit janky.
Yeah.
It really depends on the IK solve, and
Right.
I haven't worked on a game that's had that perfect yet,
Right.
so I hope that happens at some point. It would be really great. I'd love to do a fully tracked body at some point.
Yeah, that would be fun.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
No problem.
Would you say this type of stuff is also relevant to live streaming VR gameplay? Like, I have a mixed reality setup for live streaming, but I'm not really sure on how to go about creating somewhat of a avatar perspective for live streams of pre-built games like these.
There is a guy, I cannot remember the name of him off the top of my head, but he is basically doing that. He has this thing where you can insert this wizard avatar thing. If anybody knows what I'm talking about and knows the guy's name, just shout it out. But it's basically, it inserts an in-game avatar into existing games. And I don't know how he's doing it or what the tech is, but it's like this purple wizard guy, and he's got his own YouTube channel, and he's doing different games, and he's using an in-game avatar to promote them that way. So it's really interesting. Something that is possible. I don't know exactly how he's doing it. So
thank you very much.
Your Google Foo should be able to find it.
Hi. I just wanted to know, like, what is your criterion for like picking up a project? Obviously, like money is one, but like these are all very unique games, and some of them probably have higher budgets than others. So if somebody wanted to get somebody of your quality, like as an indie, like it's really, like that kind of budget just doesn't exist. I'm like bootstrapping everything, right? So what would get you interested in a project?
It has to like just resonate with me, you know, and that's really what it comes down to. Even like my non-VR trailers, I mean, it's the same deal, right? Like I got a wife, I got 2 kids that I have to work with, you know, and stuff. So it's like any additional projects that I take on, I want to make sure that it's something that I can really feel good about too. I don't like first-person shooters at all. You know, Space Pirate Trainer is like, it's different. I don't consider that, it's like an arcade game, that's different. But you know, I really love Contraption because it's about building, it's about creativity, and that just resonates with my core. Rick and Morty is awesome, and the Alchemy guys have been working with them since they did iOS games, you know, so I love their whole crew. So I mean, it's like it has to be something that resonates with me.
Okay,
that's what it really comes down to.
That's good advice.
All right, if that's it, thank you everybody. I'll be outside if you want to chat more.